Welcome once again to the online service of Warrigal Church of Christ. It's great that you can join us, and I trust that you will know the goodness of God and be able to share in a blessing as we worship together, as we share some songs, as we prepare ourselves and contemplate what Jesus has done, as we share communion together, as we pray for the work of God in missions organisations seeking to further his kingdom, and as we turn again to his word to us in the book of Ecclesiastes.
Hey everybody, and welcome to our Kids Church talk this morning. We are here at home, obviously, because we're in the lockdown. And I don't know about you guys, but we've been doing some fun things during lockdown. What's been one of your favourite things to do?
Making forts.
Making forts. We've been making forts with the cushions from our couches and different bits and pieces. And so we thought we might do that today. So, Ari and Evie, are you ready to go and make a fort?
Yeah.
Good.
So, Mummy said you're having a bit of trouble with your fort. Oh dear. What are your problems?
Well, I can't put the roof on.
What happened?
It's too short.
Righto, the roof is too short. Okay. What else is the problem?
Not stretchy.
It's not stretchy. Okay, so that's your main problem, is trying to stretch the roof across the top.
Yeah.
So you need strong walls to hold the roof up, hey? Okay.
And it's not stretchy, so it can't stretch all the way around.
Okay. What if I make some stronger walls? What if we make the walls stronger? And what can we do you think, to attach it, to hold the walls on?
Pegs and hair ties.
We could use pegs and hair
Clips.
ties, yeah, to hold the roof. That's a great idea. Yeah, I think I know what we could do. Shall we have a go at it?
Mhm.
Let's do it. Come on, let's go.
Hey, Ari, what do you think of your fort?
I love it.
It's so good, isn't it? It looks so strong. Looks like it's not going to fall in like the other one we were trying to build.
Yeah.
And you know, as you've been building some forts over the last couple of weeks during lockdowns, I've been thinking a little bit about a story from the Bible. Do you reckon we could talk about that story together? Well, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is teaching lots and lots of people about lots of really good things that they can do in their lives. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And he ends the Sermon on the Mount with a story that I know that you've heard before.
Yeah, Kinder.
Yeah, you've been talking about this story at Kinder. Let me tell you this story. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock.
No.
The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. You know, what Jesus is saying in that story is, if we can listen to what God says and put it into practice, it gives us a really good foundation for our life. Later on, a man comes to Jesus and he asks him, what is the most important thing to do? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Just like some days it's easy to build a fort, and some days it's really tough. Some days it's really easy to love God and love others, and other times it's really hard. It just feels really tough to do what God's asking us to do. But the more that we love God and love others in times when it's easy, the better we can love God and love others when times are tough and it's really hard to do those things. And you know what's even better than all of that? Just like when you're having a hard time building your fort and you come and ask Daddy and me to help you, you can ask God to help you when you're finding it hard to love God and love others. and he'll be there to help you out. Hope you're all having a really nice Sunday, and we're looking forward to seeing you all soon. And Ari, would you like to say goodbye? And then you can go and play your sport.
Yay!
Say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to talk briefly about Trivia Night. Trivia Night is still planned to go ahead on the 21st of August. It'd be great to see everyone there on that night. It would be really great to spend some time with everyone. What I wanted to say today was the Sunday that we'd planned to have our registration sheet out on a table for everyone to sign up their tables. Obviously, we can't meet in person, but we still have an online registration form that you are welcome, and not just welcome, but actually encouraged to fill out so that we can get an idea of numbers, because it really helps us plan out the night and all that kind of stuff. So I'll post that link in the chat now, and it'll get posted around the place as well for you to follow. And so if you could click on that and fill out the form when you have time, all it is just an indication of how many numbers you might have sitting at your table. That'd be really helpful for us. Thanks for that. Have a good week.
There's something a bit different that we can all do together during lockdown, if you're interested, is a video with a guy I know called Jonathan Vieira, who is a musician, a very good singer. Think of a bit of a cross perhaps of Placido Domingo and Victor Borga or Michael McIntyre. He's a musician who sings, plays a few instruments, and is a bit of a comedian at the same time. Anyway, he's a Christian guy with an interesting story of faith, journey through healing into different other aspects of just being, aware of who God is and his presence. And so I got in touch with him, and he was thrilled, gave me permission to show a DVD of his just for our congregation. And here's a little taste of what the video is like.
Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. You're so like the lady with the mystic smile. I went on the BBC and was able to share with millions of people. Actually, not so much about the healing as much about getting better. It was about God being involved in our lives. And that's what actually the story I like to tell with songs. Some Christian songs, some songs that are not explicitly Christian. But I like to know that you can, that there's joy, and God is wanting to be involved in that life of yours. And
so I will be sending out some links to watch that, probably via Zoom, maybe via YouTube Premiere, but keep an eye out for those. And we'll be running that on Monday night from about 7:20, give a bit of time for people to log on if they're Zooming and chat, and start the video at 7:30.
Today, our mission focus concerns Emmanuel Children's Program, which is supported by Churches of Christ Global Mission Partners. Based in Mariel Bai, in the northwest of South Sudan, the Emmanuel Children's Program provides care to many orphan children who rely on the wider community to provide their basic needs. You know the saying, it takes a whole village to raise a child. The community has arranged families for each child to live with. The Emmanuel Children's Program assists these families by providing lunch and primary schooling. The spiritual input for the children includes times of singing, teaching, and prayer, as well as the provision of pastoral support to the children and staff. Over the last 3 years, families have been given goats, and income from this will aid the children's education now and in the future. With that background, let us now pray for these children and all who care for them and help them. Loving Heavenly Father, you know these orphan children in South Sudan and the families who love them. We thank you for the school principal, Anthony Theek, who is now able to do his own high school studies with the support of Global Mission Partners. We pray for the health and productivity of the goats to provide good income for this community. Lord Jesus, we ask that these children may feel God's love through the families that have taken them in. May the teachers show great kindness to each one. And Holy Spirit, protect and strengthen everyone who follows Jesus and carries out God's plans and purposes in that place. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I was recently working my way through the book of Mark during my quiet times. And so I was journeying through, taken along with the disciples, watching Jesus, learning from him, experiencing his presence, and witnessing miracle after miracle where he displayed his absolute power and authority, proving who he is and who he says he is. Picking up towards the end of chapter 4, he calms the sea, a miracle showing his awesome power over the natural world. He asks the disciples, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" And I asked myself at the time, what am I fearful of? Where am I lacking faith and not trusting and believing for his mighty hand to work according to his will? Then moving on to chapter 5, Jesus casts demons into a herd of pigs, and the man who had been demon-possessed begs that he might be able to stay with Jesus. But Jesus tells him to go home to his friends and to tell them what the Lord has done for him, making reference to himself as God, another miracle demonstrating his power over the supernatural world. Following this, the woman with the issue of blood is healed simply by touching what Jesus was wearing, not even Jesus himself. And Jesus says to her, "Your faith has made you well." What amazing faith she had, and how powerful is Jesus? Next we find Jairus, who had earlier begged Jesus to come to heal his dying daughter, is now being told not to bother Jesus anymore as his daughter had died. "Do not be afraid, only believe," Jesus says. After Jairus' daughter had died. After. She was already dead. Seems a bit late, a bit impossible. But no, Jesus is God and can do the impossible. Now, further on into the middle of chapter 6, Jesus feeds the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Likely something more like 20,000 people, once you include women and children also. Either way, having 5 loaves and 2 fish feed even just 1,000 people would be just astounding. Wow, just wow. He is all-powerful. Okay, so moving on now to the very next day when Jesus walks on water. Let me read it to you. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he sent the multitude away. And when he had sent them away, he departed to the mountain to pray. Now when evening came, the boat was in the middle of the sea, and he was alone on the land. Then he saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. Now about the 4th watch of the night he came to them walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. And when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. But immediately he talked with them and said to them, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." Then he went up into the boat to them, and the wind ceased, and they were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure and marvelled. For they had not understood about the loaves, because their heart was hardened. Wait, what? They hadn't understood about the loaves? Why not? What did they not get? After hanging with Jesus all this time, seeing miracle after miracle, what is there not to understand? Why didn't they understand? They hadn't understood until then that Jesus was who he said he was, because their heart was hardened, it says. Hardened as in blinded. They weren't opposed to Jesus or hardened as we often understand it. They were slow to understand or blinded to his power. They did not learn from the miracle of the loaves that they could have, or as they could have. So I got to wondering, what do I not understand? In what way is my heart hardened, or am I blinded, at times neglecting to take in the truth of who Jesus really is, and therefore minimizing him in my own understanding? Am I doing that? Just like the disciples had experienced many miracles and were hardened or blinded to all Jesus had shown himself to be, I too can find myself experiencing him over and over in my life, only to neglect to continue to consider all he shows me, to ponder it and allow God to continue shaping and growing my appreciation of who he is. This lessens my understanding at times and my picture of just who he is and the power he holds in my life, in your life, over the entire world around us. Does the same happen to you? It's important for us to consistently consider and to think upon all God shows us about himself, so we might live our lives in the fullness of all he has for us, continuing to grasp every truth about him that he so lovingly shows us. So as we take the elements now, let's remember and understand and know Jesus in all the fullness of who he is. God's one and only Son, God in person, God with us. He humbled himself, being obedient to death on a cross. He paid the price owed by all so that all who put their trust in him can have the free gift of eternal life with him. Let's pray. Father, you are good. You are loving. You are amazing and all-powerful. Thank you for sending Jesus to live on earth as a man, to further demonstrate all you are and to make the ultimate sacrifice so that we can be with you forever. Forgive us for the times we neglect to continue to consider all you show us of yourself and all we experience in you. Soften our hearts and open our eyes and ears to all you have to show us about who you are, so that we might truly grow in our knowledge and understanding of you and be faithful followers, giving our lives wholly to you. Thank you for your amazing love for us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Many times I've wondered at your gift.
So this week we're looking again at Ecclesiastes, and today I want us to look at chapter 11. We've sort of, I guess you could say, skipped over a few, but perhaps not really, because from where we were last week through to here, it's just, I guess, some more of the observations of Colette that, life can seem meaningless. We can accumulate, and at the end we, leave it all behind, and there seems to be some elements of injustice and so on. But he's starting to come to the point where he does recognise that there are some things that do begin to bring meaning to life. So if you've got a Bible and you want to follow along, beginning at chapter 11. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. Give portions to 7, yes to 8, for you do not know what disasters may come upon the land. If clouds are full of water, they pour rain upon the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there will it lie. He doesn't tell us whether we hear it if no one's there, but anyway. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the path of the wind or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. Sow your seed, therefore, in the morning, and at evening let not your hands be idle. For you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Cast your bread upon the waters, or if you're reading along and you've got a more recent Bible, you might notice that it sort of has changed that, because not really about feeding ducks, I don't think. More modern translations might say, ship your grain across the sea, for after many days you may receive a return. So I don't know whether you're aware, but if this was written by Solomon or collected sayings of his, he knew something about shipping his grain across the sea. We read this in 1 Kings, that the king had a fleet of trading ships at sea, along with the ships of Hiram, and once every 3 years the fleet returned carrying gold, silver and ivory, and apes and baboons. A rather interesting market, we might think, that it would come to. But is this passage just investment advice, or is it something more? Well, I think it is more. Perhaps it has something to do with some investment advice, but I think ultimately for us today, it's a call to act, to do. I was tempted to call this message, for God's sake, just do something. Because verse 1, 4 and 6 together all urge us to act, and to act now, and not to procrastinate and just do nothing. Sometimes, concerning some things, we do hesitate. We watch what's going on, we worry about what might happen or what we can do, and so we end up doing nothing. But verse 1, act, cast your bread upon the waters. Verse 4, whoever watches the wind will not plant, and whoever looks at the clouds will not weep. If you're just watching and worrying, you'll never do anything. And verse 6 says, sow your seed in the morning and at evening. Don't let your hands be idle, for you don't know which will succeed, whether what you've done in the morning or you've done in the evening. Maybe both will do equally well, but do something. So, this call to not just be procrastinating, not just put things off, is a call for us to do something. And that's important, because I don't know whether you've ever been like me and felt paralysed sometimes with decisions or what is before us that we could do. Paralysed a bit perhaps by uncertainty. You aren't sure of what will happen if you do X, so you end up doing nothing. And I know sometimes in leadership discussions and so on, I've had to say to people that not making a decision is making a decision. Doing nothing is doing something. But the thing is, often the case, we are a bit paralysed by uncertainty, sometimes perhaps because there is an element of risk attached, a possibility of losing something that we have or something that we value. And together these drive us perhaps to do nothing, and we sit around waiting instead for something to change before we act. An interesting guy, a psychologist, who trivia. I don't know whether Jack's got this down as one of his trivia questions, but this guy, William Moulton Marsden, apparently came up with the Wonder Woman character and comics. I don't know whether that's anything to do with what he does here, but he was a psychologist, and he apparently did a survey of 3,000 individuals back 60, 70 years ago, saying, what have you to live for? And the answers shocked him. He found that 94% were not living at all, he would say. They were simply enduring the present while waiting for something in the future. You might think that's how you feel in lockdown at the moment, but perhaps I've got something to say about that in a minute. These people were waiting for something to happen, waiting for their children to grow up and leave home, waiting for next year when they thought things would be better or at least different, waiting for a chance to take a trip, waiting for tomorrow. And for them, life had deteriorated to a cycle with little meaning in and of itself. And you might recall 2 weeks ago, I said that we often live in the past or in wanting the future to be here already. People say we are the now generations, but I was saying we're kind of not the now. We look fondly to the past, and we look longingly to what a future might be like, and we might want the future to be here already, but we don't actually live in the now. But the now is where we do actually exist, where time touches eternity, where our lives touch the everlasting God. And even so, it can seem like it in lockdowns, our lives are not on hold. Some aspect of our activities, some parts of what we have done and will do again are limited at the moment, but our lives aren't on hold. We are still alive, and God still wants to imbue our days with life, to act. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. The sort of traditional reading here. I have no idea if the Jewish hearers of this originally would have thought of manna. The manna in the wilderness, the bread in the wilderness. If they had, they might have remembered something about manna, which maybe you will remember as well from the story of the Exodus. And that's that you couldn't keep it long. You could go out and the manna came and you could gather enough for today. But if you gathered too much, if you gathered a lot and kept it, it deteriorated. And you couldn't have it. In fact, you were no better off having accumulated and gathered a whole bunch than if you just gathered as much as you needed for that day. Living in the moment and trusting God for the rest. The New Testament also has some warnings of those who are, afraid of losing what they have and perhaps try and, get most of it and hang on to it, but merely are really hoarding it in barns that get bigger and bigger. Matthew 6, don't store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moth and rust destroy, but don't store up treasures on earth, but store up treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy, for where your treasure is, there your heart is. And Luke 12, the story of the guy with the bigger and bigger barns. They're kind of sad parables, and Ecclesiastes, in a way, echoes those sentiments, often pointing out that at the end of life, the truism that, you can't take it with you, or even be sure that you can leave it to anyone else. So there's advice here. Do something with what you have. The proverb here in verse 1, cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. That might seem a bit worrying, cast your bread upon the waters. I mean, that sounds good. If after many days you'll find it again, but perhaps you're worried that if you're just chucking this stuff away, you're throwing it on the water, it might seem to just be taken away and lost to us. But ultimately, I don't think it is, because it's true, and there's a promise here that you won't totally lose those things that you let go of while you're acting in the present, because God will see a return. And so we're urged to use what we have and act in a few different ways. Act adventurously is a word I would use here. Even in spite of there being risks involved, act, be brave, dare just a little bit with the things of your life. And verse 2 urges us to act as well, but adds another dimension. To act generously. Give portions to 7, yes to 8. And no, when the 9th person comes, you don't say, sorry, the Bible only says to give to 8. The way this is worded means give much and then give more. You might have heard of John Wesley, the guy who founded what became known as the Methodists, and he's got an often quoted rule for Christian living that bears repeating. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. You know, and Wesley knew about living generously. I've talked about that before. He had a high earned income for the time because of books being sold, but he lived simply on only a little more than he did before he had that great income. He gave, he acted, and boy, did he get a return on the investment of his life. And verses 4 to 6 expand even further on our generous actions. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. So sow your seed in the morning, and at the evening don't let your hands be idle. For you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Act, and not just occasionally, continually, in the morning and in the evening. Remember, I talked a few weeks ago about the idea of a merism. These aren't opposites. When the Hebrew language was used this way, it indicated those two words were inclusive of everything in between as well. So sow in the morning, sow in the evening, actually sow into your life at all times, because you don't know which of what you do is going to see a return. So act diligently, and I would say act devotedly. And, you know, rather than these acts that we might do, people talk about random acts of kindness. I think kindness is one of the great ways we can act to sow our bread and see a return. But instead of random acts of kindness, although I know what they mean by that, just, you know, doing them for people wherever and whenever, I think maybe we should encourage one another to live lives where we act consistently in kind ways. You know, these generous, consistent actions are actually also urged upon us without any real regard for reward or return. Yes, there's some, you know, kind of hint that there will be return, but we don't know which of the things we do will generate that return. These 6 verses here, just verses 1 to 6, they tell us at least 5 times that we do not know, and we cannot know what will come of our actions. But that doesn't mean, well, you don't know, so don't do it, or study hard to find out and be sure that you're going to get a return before you do anything. You know, there's an assumption here that unless we neglect to do anything at all, you know, verse 4, just look at the wind, look at the clouds and say, oh, I don't know if it's any good, I'll do nothing. Provided we actually do cast our bread on the waters, and we do sow, whether it's morning, whether it's evening, whether it's noontime, some of what we sow, not all of what we sow, perhaps, and not necessarily this bit or that bit, but some will see a harvest. The actions that we are urged to do, a result, are reaping. That can seem a bit odd to us, a bit wasteful. Surely it's better to make sure that all of our effort actually produces a return. But, you know, I think what we are urged to do here is we're encouraged to participate in life, even with the risks and uncertainties, that what we do may not see the return, because some will, and God does give us that as a promise. To do something, even if we might not feel it's entirely safe to do that. And I want to say something about that, I guess, at the moment. Like, what actually is risk? Well, risk is not being reckless. You know, hear me right here. People often will take reckless actions and say, well, I'm just taking a risk, and we've got to take risks in life. Well, but we're not to be reckless, heedless of the consequences of our actions, rash and inconsiderate. Inconsiderate's an interesting part there, I think, which helps to differentiate what's reckless from risk. You know, a risk is, you know, recognizing that there's a hazard, and perhaps being prepared to lose something, but still with a hopeful expectancy, faith in a return. But not indiscriminately, and not, you know, doing something that, you know, doesn't just cost us, but that costs others, especially when it really costs the others more than it costs us. This isn't a mindless or an unweighed risk, and it's definitely not actions that risk harming others. We might lose our investment of time, money, or reputation. You know, think of Esther. risking her position as queen, even risking her life, going to the king to tell him what's going on and seek to bring safety and salvation to her people. That's risking her life and reputation for the benefit of others, not risking the lives of others. In fact, their lives were already at risk, and she was seeking to bring healing, salvation, and safety. We're not to take actions that put others that we're bound to care for at risk. That is recklessness. For ourselves, that's one thing, but for others, that's recklessness. Leviticus 19:16 says, don't do anything that endangers your neighbour's life. Or Romans 13:10, love does no harm to a neighbour. Therefore, love is the fulfilment of the law. But unfortunately, over the decades, I've seen people claim faith as an excuse for taking a risk with other people's well-beings. Often that's been in the, reality of some grandiose ministry project or building project sometimes, in a church where they're wanting everyone to show their faith by risking their finances. I was even somewhere where people wanting people to max out their personal credit cards, to give the money to the church, to pay off the church building debt and build the extension or something, not perhaps so much of a risk of the person saying that, especially if they're somewhat, golden-tongued and able to convince others. Pressing church members to take out their super and invest it in hiring a stadium for some revival event, those things are rash and inconsiderate, reckless, not risk. But we're urged to act adventurously, generously, and devotedly. And as we do that, we have a hopeful expectancy, but also need to be prepared to lose. Some of what we cast upon the waters will not come back. Above all this morning, what I have in mind is the gospel, the good news that we know and hopefully that we live about Jesus. It says in 1 Peter 3:15 this, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. Cast your bread upon the waters. We can often think, well, there's no point talking to that person. They're just closed to the gospel, or nothing I say will have an influence on them. But we should be ready to encourage and challenge and speak the gospel, or better, live the gospel before others, to neighbours, to friends, to enemies, to our co-workers, our bosses, to teammates, to family members. We should never write a person off because they don't show an interest in the gospel. We cast our bread. Is it effective? Would it be a waste to tell that person? I have no idea. There's a guy who, John Wanamaker, I've got written here in my notes, I'm pretty sure that's the guy back over 100 years ago, started some department stores and made a comment about advertising. And I think he said something along the lines of, 50% of my ad budget's wasted. I just don't know which 50%. And you might think, well, 50% of your ad budget's wasted. Don't waste that. Just spend the 50% that's effective. But he didn't know which of the 50% was effective. He didn't know, was it the TV? Was it the radio? Was it the newspaper? Was it the billboard? Was it the flyer? Was it the... So he cast his bread upon the waters. And when it comes to sharing the gospel, we don't know of the things we do which are effective. We can sometimes know which are ineffective, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we don't know, and we don't know what influence we have in what we say and what we do. We don't always know who is watching, and even more so, like today, online. We don't know who's watching, who's listening. We don't know what might happen if, or maybe I should say when, God calls to those people. Isaiah says this, so my word that goes forth from my mouth, it will not return to me empty. Sounds a bit like the cast your bread upon the waters and it will not return to you void. My word goes out from my mouth, it will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. One of my favourite examples of this is something I read about while researching for this sermon. It's something about God's surprising harvest, and it's the conversion of a guy called Luke Short, who at the tender age of 103, he was sitting under a hedge in Virginia. This is back quite a few hundred years ago. hedge in Virginia, sitting under a hedge at 103, being a farmer, whether he was still farming or not at that age. And he happened to remember a sermon that he'd once heard preached by a famous Puritan. So this really is back, in the early 1700s. He'd remembered a sermon he'd heard preached by John Flavel. And as he recalled that sermon, Short asked God to forgive his sins right then and there through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he lived another 3 years. And when he died, the following words were inscribed on his grave: "Here lies a babe in grace, aged 3 years, who died according to nature, aged 106. But the remarkable part of that story? The sermon that old 103-year-old Mr. Short remembered and pondered had been preached 85 years earlier in Dartmouth in the United Kingdom, before he'd migrated to America. Nearly a century had passed between Flavel's sermon and Short's conversion, between the casting of the bread upon the waters and the word returning. We don't know. So when we come to acting with our faith adventurously, generously, diligently, devotedly, I talked about risk, but what is it that we actually risk here? Well, I've got a friend who wrote a song which is kind of interesting, and he, talked about meeting some people and saying, what if I said something to them? What if I told them what I knew was true? Would they listen? Would they believe? Or would they just turn and leave? I could say something, or I could just stay silent. And in the lyrics he says this: "Again I find myself in this situation. I can't stop thinking about my reputation." And then the kicker, that I don't even have, with those I don't even know. I'm missing opportunities to plant a seed that could grow. Now let me harken back to something. Please don't be reckless in sharing your faith, especially. Heedless of the consequences of actions. We don't know everything about what we do in terms of whether it would be effective, but we can know some things are ineffective. Some bumper stickers I've seen, some tracts I've seen given out, some ways that people have tried to share the faith, we know those are ineffective. They might have been effective sometimes, but we can know that living our lives in a way that, as I've said before, indicate that we're satisfied customers rather than trying to be used car salesmen is an effective way. That witnessing to our lives by showing how we live, being prepared, yes, to risk our reputation that we don't even have with people perhaps that we don't even know sometimes. Again, there's another thing here in verse 6 that it talked about the teacher urging his readers to sow their seed both in the morning and the evening, for you don't know which will prosper. Jesus told his hearers the parable of the sower. Sowed the seed liberally. The word of God, the gospel, was sowed liberally on the path, on the rocky ground, among the thorns and on the good soil, not knowing which would prosper. And as Christians, we are to sow the words of the kingdom extravagantly, since we do not know which of it God will prosper. So act. And why act? Especially when it comes to sharing our faith in appropriate ways, because of this. Let's not become weary in doing good. Remember, good news, gospel, good, living out, showing this goodness through all that we are, all that we have, all that we do. Let's not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. We have an opportunity. Even in the midst of lockdown, there are opportunities, especially even just to do good, to encourage, to bless, to learn and develop so that you are, as we read in Peter, prepared to give an answer for the hope that is within you when people ask. So this little passage in Ecclesiastes, having talked about what he'd seen in life as being meaningless, the author of this, now towards the end, is starting to talk about the ways in which he has found meaning. And it begins with a call to act here in chapter 11. And I think it's a call for us to act adventurously, to act generously, to act diligently and to act devotedly. Not because by those things we win the approval of God, but because by those things we bring the goodness of God to those who are still stuck in the rut of thinking everything is meaningless. Well, let me pray. Lord, thank you that you are the God who acts and who wants us to join you as you're active in our world, especially as we seek to share the faith and life that we have. We cannot know the impact our lives have this side of heaven, but we can choose to live for you, recognizing the adventure of life, joining you in your generous love and compassion, and not as a portion, but as the whole of our being, devoted to the one who first loved us, that we may know and find meaning in being yours. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, and we will trust in you.
Waiting on my train at the Amtrak station, I overheard an interesting conversation between three young people and a man and his wife, pontificating if there could be any more to this life. Hey, they share their journeys through religion and health, food and yoga classes, smoking grass and time spent in solitude, disillusion that was painted like the scream on their faces from looking for your love in all the wrong places. What if I would say something about you? What if I proclaim what I know is true? I wonder if they'd listen, or if they would believe to the one they're missing. Would they turn and leave? Yeah. Well, I could just stay silent and pray, but what if I would say, hey, hey, hey. Again, I find myself in this situation. I can't stop thinking about my reputation that I don't even have with those I don't even know. I'm missing opportunities to plant a seed that could grow. But would I hesitate to make a suggestion when I possess the answer to their every question? It don't even make sense. There's no logic behind it. Here they're looking for a treasure and I won't help them find it. Hey, hey, hey. What if I would say something about you? What if I'd proclaim what I know is true? I wonder if they'd listen, or if they would believe into the one they're missing. Would they turn and leave? Yeah. Well, I could just stay silent and pray. But what if I would say, well, I swallowed my fear and I opened my mouth and I told them that you are what life's all about. Yeah, that everything they're seeking and all that they crave, gave his life on a cross and he rose from the grave. You might think I'm foolish, but I could not walk away when I'm living in the answer to the quandary you face. And all of them but one smiled condescendingly. But in the eyes of the exception gleamed a spark of possibility. Yeah. We caught my train and our lives rolled on, and 4 years later I was back in that town, sipping coffee in my favorite place. I looked up to find a woman with a smile on her face. She said, you don't remember me, but for years I have dreamt that I might have an opportunity at least to attempt to thank you for the part you played in my soul's salvation. When you spoke of the Lord that day at the station, we talked about life, and from that day she's a completely different person and how things changed. And ever since that conversation there on the spot, I'll always have an answer to the question I've got. Yeah. What if I would say something about you? What if I proclaim what I know is true? Wonder if they'd listen, or if they would believe to the one they're missing. Would they turn and leave? Yeah. I don't wanna just stay silent and pray, 'cause what if I would say, yeah, down. What if I would say, hey, 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 hey. What if I would